read 3 to 5 books every single week and about 6 to 10 research articles. And I want to digest one of the books with you chapter by chapter. The book that I am reading today is Pedagogy of the Oppressed, hyper focusing on chapter 1. This is really important for me because as I am deepening my understanding on what is the role of education, I think a lot of times we tie education solely to the classroom or career mobility and going up the ladder, whether it's financially, but ultimately the goal of education is to live a self-sustaining life. What does that mean? How we're thinking through things critically, whether it's the arts, whether it's technology, whether it's science, whether it's history, whether it's love, thinking through these things critically, but also to see the liberation in each one of these intersections of life. Also to understand the goal of education is freedom. That's a full stop right there. And that is actually where I want to bridge my thought process with chapter 1. And in this conversation with freedom, it requires us to understand what is autonomy of self. What is autonomy of community? And we can look at this again through the lens of solidarity, right? But what does solidarity require? What does freedom require? And what is the responsibility of freedom? What is the responsibility to be free? And that then calls for you to really reflect on how do you view yourself? What are the images? What are the depictions of self that you have? And does that align to what it means to be free? Also, there's this duality in suffering. There's this commitment to suffering. There's this comfort in suffering that we also have to address. And I think this conversation is had at such a surface level. It's like, you just got to do it. You just got to find your own way, right? And that doesn't acknowledge the seams on our sadness, our grief, our hardship. But also this chapter really emphasizes that liberation is painful. Like coming to the understanding of you're greater than your situation. You're greater than what one says about you. You're greater than your oppression. I also want to put a pin here. So many people don't understand that they are of an oppressed group. Okay? And I need y'all to genuinely understand that, to also understand the beauty, the pain, and the significance of what it means to be free and what it means to be liberated. And however these words fall on your heart and in your mind, I want you to deeply sit with that and resonate with that. And I'm intentionally not giving definitions on those words. I also was hit by this concept of rebellion as a gesture of love, because I think so many times the rebel gets such a bad rep, right? It doesn't matter in the smallest depictions or in like the grandiose Hollywood depictions of the rebel, of, you know, being the badass. But if we understand what it means to rebel and the act of rebellion through love, I think we also understand liberation, right? We understand freedom. And we also have to call into question the role of domination, and domination through the lens of consumption, right? Through the lens of perception, through the lens of winning, and what are we trying to conquer and who is being conquered. All of these things call into question not only what is to be won, but also our ethics and our morals. And tying this back to education in the classroom, from like a teacher, educator to student perspective, you want to ensure that you're not teaching through the lens of dominance, but teaching through the lens of dialogue. And we see this conversation and we see this practice a lot in indigenous teaching and research strategies. And I think when we are understanding Western concepts and we're understanding like standardized testing, we're not teaching through understanding of that intellectual rigor through the lens of collaboration, through the lens of freedom, through the lens of liberation. It's through these lens of objective measures and grading policies, right? And so understanding how is there solidarity there, or is there pockets of solidarity that can be found? Because it's completely uprooting and redoing the system of teaching, curriculum, and designing within classroom context and within the ivory towers or within the academy is not going to be completely uprooted. And so when we're finding community, when we're finding solidarity, when we're finding support, we also have to be able to identify and name what does that look like for us, so we can move through these systems, so we can move through these enterprises, so we can move through these academic settings with even if we don't have a breath of ease, but a community with a freedom, with a liberation, if that makes sense. In ending this conversation in chapter 1, there was also a conversation of money is a measure of all things and profit being a primary goal. And I'm going to have a separate conversation on that because I'm also taking a class on money, funding, and is it fair? Is it just? Is it equitable in different education systems, enterprises, and school districts? But also the role of self-deprecation. The role that self-deprecation has in freedom, in autonomy, and in oppression. And I want to speak about this not through the lens of education, but through the lens of love, because ultimately I am a love scholar and I want to always connect everything through love. And I was really thinking about this. Where does my disdain with self-deprecating language come from? And I really sat with this for a moment. And my disdain towards self-deprecating language is that it is an acknowledgement of your pain. And I never feel comfortable laughing at someone's pain. And I think we have normalized making ourselves the butt of the joke, making ourselves like laugh our way out of our pain rather than giving it grace and space and naming the support in which we need. And chapter 1 of this book says self-deprecation is another characteristic of the oppressed, which derives from their internalization of their own opinion that the oppressor holds to them. And I really want people to understand, where is the root of that language coming from? And when I say language, I mean self-deprecating language. Because language also matters. One of the very first classes that I was taking in my doctoral degree was all about language, all about literature, and understanding the importance of that and understanding the intention to that. And if we're also tying this back to the concept of freedom, you cannot have self-deprecating language and hope to be free. And in chapter 3 of this book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, it speaks about the difference between hopefulness and hopelessness. But I want to end on people truly understanding the importance of language, because language matters, but also understanding that one, liberation, again, is painful. But 2, where are the pockets of love, and love through this lens of rebellion and autonomy? Where does that lie for you?